I don't think she's going to sit still for this.
Just put her down. Let her play while we talk. Hopefully she'll entertain herself.
You say dada? Yeah. I'm going to put you down, okay? Yeah. What I was saying, though, is
She's got a lot to say now.
Yeah. That's right. She knows it's my turn to talk.
Welcome to the Golden Shadow. My name is Alyssa Polizzi.
And I'm R.N. Rogerson.
In that intro, you heard a first take of us trying to record the podcast with our daughter, who is about 10 months old, and it didn't work very well.
She was more disruptive than we were expecting.
We thought it'd be really cute.
I'm not sure what we were expecting, really.
Like, she'll be in the background. She'll be like, na, 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 na. And it'd be a little sweet because we're talking about parenthood.
Yeah, and she's very talkative. She's very expressive, likes to use her voice a lot.
It was humbling, to say the least, to try to manage her needs and her demands and her interests in all the equipment around.
Yeah, she really wanted to touch the mics. Yeah. You can't do that because you get like this kind of sound when you touch the mics, and that's really not good. And also, she seemed to instinctively know that if you touch the keyboard, that it would stop the recording, and she kept reaching for the keyboard.
Yeah, it was very sweet though, just to capture a little bit of her, because today we're talking about parenthood and what that journey has been like for us for the past 10 months or so. And it's not easy to sum up into words. It's something that has felt to me deeply personal and at the same time deeply archetypal in its collective aspect. Like, I feel so connected to what is beyond me and all who have come before me and everyone in my line who has gone through this process. And it's sometimes kind of woven in between that kind of personal and collective layer. And sometimes it's just really, really hard and exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, definitely for us, there's the personal aspect, and there's kind of the zoomed out sort of analytic aspect.
Yeah.
That's what the podcast really is zooming out while also exploring personal experience.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, as I also said, it's having a child changes you, and the last 10 months have been very different than all the time preceding it for both of us, I think. There's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, having a kid is hard. It's a lot of work. There's no breaks from it for the most part. You don't get a weekend from it where the baby can be turned off for 48 hours while you go do what you want. It's just every day you have the baby in your life. And so it is sort of this completely all-encompassing paradigm shift in your lifestyle, but also, I would say, even in your phenomenology, in your subjectivity. What we call reality is essentially a projection, and each of us has our own sort of projective landscape of reality. And I think that when you have a kid, your entire problem space, or the entire way you filter incoming information, suddenly changes to being in reference to the child. Either, is this safe for my child? Is it healthy for them? Is it fun for them? Will they enjoy this? Are they enjoying this? A lot of the incoming information is going through them, or it might even be that the world is now being viewed from their eyes, which maybe is like a little different. Like, you might suddenly find all the things that they find interesting to also be interesting, whereas before they felt really mundane, right? So children will stop and, smell the roses, essentially. They will point at things like the grass and just find it to be really interesting, and they'll want to sit there and just sort of bask in all the information that's coming from this sort of freshly cut lawn or this tree in your backyard. And it'll make you realize, oh, that is really beautiful. And I just walk by that every day and I don't really think about it very much. But yeah, that tree is really interesting.
Yeah.
Like, let's just stare at it for a while. And you can kind of get into their mind and sort of, in some ways, you're sort of re-entering the child space. Like your inner child, I think, is being activated by the external child that you now have.
Yeah.
You're also reliving some of the experiences you had when you were younger. You're trying to conform your world now to them in some way, to make it fit to them instead of just fit to you, to fit to their needs instead of just fitting to your needs, and to fitting sort of something that transcends you, I think, in a very embodied, very literal, externalized way.
Yeah. One aspect that's been really fascinating is to watch how those around us are also impacted by the child, and how bringing new life to the world seems to revitalize family dynamics, community dynamics, draws you closer to certain people. Certainly also kind of draws a line between you and others where it's like clearly there's diverging paths, and that life you were living before is no longer the one of your friends, and it's hard to find that common ground. But the effect it's had on family members and community, especially, I mean, it's like you hear about this all the time, grandparents just suddenly feel re-energized, and, people offer their support, but to experience it firsthand has been really, really beautiful, because I can see these threads of joy that have blossomed from my family members and how it's changing them, even though they're not with her every day. There's just something so deeply powerful about both the joy and the innocence and all the potential that a child represents, that just it injects this really dynamic, really powerful energy to all who are close to it.
Yeah, absolutely. We have experienced people treating us differently, people expressing more affection and love towards us openly than they would before. Not to say that they didn't feel affectionately towards us or love us before, but they sort of feel this very, I would say, almost like embodied primal instinct to, I would say, kind of reach out and offer their energy.
Yeah.
It's almost like a natural generosity that is cultivated in people when they're around children.
Yeah.
You see that, I think, even if it's just a random baby passes you by on the street. It's like
For sure.
the emotion that's being expressed, like the feeling that's being conjured up in people when they go like, oh, like that sort of reaction is very primal. It's very old. And I think the reaction is the equivalent to saying like, here's some loving, generous energy towards this thing. Like if it were in trouble, I would jump in to save it. If it needed something, I would hand it to it. If it wanted to connect with me, I'd like to connect with it, even strangers. But certainly for the family, just anecdotally, my family's pretty close. We've always been close. I feel like I have a pretty functional family for the most part. Obviously not perfect, but even with my functional close family, I feel like before the next generation entered the family, that is, before my brother started having kids, he started having kids before I did a few years ago. Before that, I feel like the family sort of felt like it was kind of drifting apart in certain ways. People were finding less reason to kind of come together or to even have good conversations about stuff. We get together every so often, whatever. But as soon as the children were born, there's suddenly this new thing that's almost ignited in the family. And you can think of the family or the community or the tribe as almost like this weird sort of amorphous object. It's made up of a bunch of individuals. It's hard to say who's in the tribe, who's not in the tribe maybe. And people come and go, but like it is a real object. And that object, I think, is sort of cyclical in the sense that like there's an older generation that's aging out of the tribe as they die.
Yeah.
And there's an incoming energy of newborns that are sort of revitalizing the tribe.
Yeah.
And so there's always this constant cycle in and out, in and out, in and out that is just happening all the time. It's like cyclical. And I think in the past that was much more obvious when you had tribes that stayed together their entire lives. Like there's always the incoming and the outgoing all the time. And so when children enter the tribe, when they're born, there's almost like these new little fires are lit.
Yeah.
And suddenly they're like, this fire of life has sort of like been reignited, and people feel that. They feel really happy and good. It makes them feel a lot of positive energy about their life. Like there's like children around, and they also find more reason to come together and sort of like cultivate that sort of communal flame. Like everyone wants to pitch in and lift these children up, like practice agape, sort of like offer them selfless love, parental love. So that's a really interesting thing, is that sort of cyclical nature of communities, I think.
Yeah.
And that's what children are obviously they're a very important, integral part of that cycle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know, one thing that I feel like you hear a lot is how hard it is to be a parent in modernity, essentially. At least here in the West, I can't really speak, for everywhere in the world, but in America, in the West, our family structures have become really atomized. And even around me, I see a lot of my friends who have chosen to have kids, and the struggle of managing a full-time job and all the other duties and responsibilities of life. And then you add children on top of it, and it's like they're barely getting by. And it's almost like you have to weigh this decision of, I don't know, like your sanity, like your ability to keep going, the threat of constant burnout, like
you
all
might even
these
say
things.
like your youth has to be weighed against having a child.
Yeah.
Because like you could stay young for a while in a way. You keep living sort of like the adolescent lifestyle where you just kind of do whatever you want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or you trade that in for a child, and suddenly like you're not young anymore.
Yeah.
Like you've lost that youth in some ways in exchange for passing on life onto a different person.
Yeah, but I feel like that choice, at least for those at our age where we're facing, should we have kids or not? I think in some ways the temptation to perpetuate adolescence is even stronger because the weight of parenthood feels heavier than ever before. And but one thing that has come out of the energy of the child drawing people out is that it suddenly feels more possible because there's energy people want, they want to give it. They want to be a part of it, and it lifts us up because we can't do it alone, and we shouldn't do it alone. No one should do it alone.
Yeah.
And so the fact that, like our child gets to hang out with her grandparents a few days a week, or we can call on, my sister to like drop us off a meal, or, these types of things. Like it starts to just highlight the importance of, what's the statement? It takes a village.
Yeah.
And I think that's really hard for probably a lot of us in the modern day to find that, because a lot of our structures of family and community are not as strong as they once were. Even for me, growing up on the East Coast in a very, very integrated, very large family unit, that is not what it looks like. We moved.
Your life was basically The Sopranos, right?
Yeah, if you want an image, there you go. Or Goodfellas. Not to say they were mobsters,
not
but
quite as exaggerated as those movies make it out to be.
I don't know. It was pretty exaggerated.
Culturally, you get a taste of what Alyssa's life might have been like if she had stayed on the East Coast.
Big family parties, cousins over all of the time. My grandma was a huge part of raising us. My godmother, my godfather, everyone was around, and it was so alive. And it was also very toxic. Like, don't get me wrong, Italians are, known for their intensity. They love hard, they fight hard. But not having that now, I can see the loss, but I can also appreciate that there are people coming out who want to be a part of it. And it makes me really want to try to cultivate that as much as I can for our child, because I think having the multi-generational dynamic is really important. I think having other people, like there's something so special about the energy of an uncle or an aunt or even a family friend, things like that. So it's something really beautiful that we've witnessed, and I think at the same time it's amplified the loss or the shifts or changes that have happened too.
Yeah, a lot in there. Yeah, I think it's a very what would you say, common conversation that people are having nowadays about children, birth rates, how expensive it is to raise a child, mostly in sort of like coastal urban areas.
Mm-hmm.
As I always say, there could be a whole other episode about that, about like what's up with that, like what's happening to the world that's leading to birth rates falling in a lot of places. And I think just to put it simply, it's like the kind of progress or development or innovations that come from these big advanced cities like San Francisco or New York or Los Angeles or what's becoming to Austin or Denver, etc. These places, they're really good for a certain kind of thing to grow and develop, which I would say is like kind of like tech culture, innovation, cultural, the arts,
Yeah.
all those things. But it's not necessarily true that those things align very well with raising a family. And that's sort of the weird paradox.
I think it's also why you get the idea of like your friends move away to the suburbs once they start
Absolutely.
having kids.
I mean, the phenomenon of the suburbs is
Yeah.
like, maybe you kind of got your start in the city when you were younger and you kind of planted some roots career-wise or socially, but then you leave because the city no longer lends itself to raising children. And there's a lot in there, like why? What does that mean? And, you could, again, have a very long conversation about that. But, it has become, for people who have grown up in a dense, urban, very appealing area like the Bay Area of California, which is where we've grown up, the cost of housing is so extreme, the cost of living is so extreme that the cost of having a child also becomes very extreme, even just because you need space.
Yeah.
Like we need more space because we have a kid now, and it's like this, we can't raise a kid in like a one room studio apartment. Let's say, like if you have 2 kids, you have 3 kids. It's like, how the fuck are you gonna like raise them if you have only like 500 square feet? Although families do make that work in other places in the world, but it becomes very expensive. So the way that's affected us, obviously, is that we're having to confront some pretty difficult, confusing problems about like what do we do with our life. Our life is changing in a way that cannot essentially survive where it is now.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's probably true for anyone who's going to raise a family. Is likely there's something kind of like, the paradigm has changed. How do we make things work?
Yeah.
So that's like another aspect of parenthood is like, how do we change our life to no longer be, let's say like rogue, starving artists just kind of, drifting around, which you can kind of keep up forever if you want to. You don't need a ton of capital to make that work. Once you start having kids, like you're suddenly confronted like, okay, so if we're going to like make this work in the Bay Area, I guess we're going to need about like $3 million. It's like, like, how are we going to do that? So that's another aspect of parenthood that I think most people will be confronted with if they decide to have kids and they live anywhere that is, remotely appealing, I would say.
Yeah.
Desirable to live. Some people are set up for it. Most people are not set up for it.
Well, what I think is interesting is that you can be set up in certain ways, say maybe financially or you bought a house, but I think there's always some aspect of parenthood that gets you because you can't be fully prepared in all ways. And I think especially for the internal experience, because you just don't know what's going to arise, both, I think, as, while pregnant and before birth and then post birth. And my God, all the stages and how quickly they develop and all the challenges that brings and the way that it's stretching you. And so one might have a secure job. They might have a village of support, which is fantastic. But then there are other challenges that come up, and what do we begin to do about that? And what I have found interesting is, as those internal challenges have come up, it's become very clear how much less resource I have now to funnel into that, where before it was, got my time to, journal or do some meditation or do a tarot reading and reflect. And, I have my, my daily schedule that keeps me grounded, and it is energy constantly filtered back into self. And that suddenly has become depleted. And
your energy is being filtered into the baby,
yeah,
instead of yourself.
Yeah. And so much of that is such, I don't know, it feels incredible to do that, to give her my attention, to give her my energy, to give her my focus. And then there are certain moments when you're like, now I feel the effects of not having that for myself.
For sure. It's a trade-off. I mean, as we're saying, it's like choosing to have a child. If, it depends how you think of it. It could be controversial, but like if you're going to have a child, it's like you shouldn't be doing it for selfish reasons, as if it's going to be like something that is fun or makes you just as an individual like feel better. It's more like you should interpret it that you were about to start giving away your own life force to another thing. And that thing's going to essentially eat your life force. And it's literally doing it when you're pregnant, right? Yeah. It's like consuming your resources. It's even like eating your, your bones, right? Isn't that
it
a
could,
thing
yeah.
when you're pregnant?
Yeah.
But that continues. Like once the child's born, it's like, it's like, give me your life force, mommy. And you're like, I am giving you my life force. You take it freely. Yeah. And it's going to do that and do that and do that probably until it's, who knows how old.
Yeah.
And then, but that's the natural arc of life, right? So if you follow Arn's work, like this is like a big thing that like I talk about that I'm like quite interested in exploring, is sort of the notion of the torch as like the metaphor for kind of like the core experience of what it means to be human or what it means to be alive, and the natural arc of living things, and specifically for humans in this case, is that at some point you stop living for yourself and you start living for something else.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's something else that's kind of like more amorphous and hard to put your finger on, like you're like making big contributions to culture or something, or building something. But usually what it means is that you're giving yourself away to your children, and they're going to take your light, your flame, and like carry that torch into the future. And then you like willingly lean into fading away. Like being a parent is like you're willingly saying, I am going to lean into fading as my children are growing. Like you're almost like you're saying yes to the life cycle. Saying yes to death is like, sounds really like pejorative, and it's like that's not right, but like it's kind of true. It's like, you're going to die someday. Everyone's going to die someday. And so you can kind of try to just keep running from that your entire life, or you can, alarm's going off, sorry. You can keep running from that your entire life, or you can say, yes, I'm going to die eventually. Yes, I'm going to fade away. And that you can say yes to passing the torch, which is like what I think having kids is. And the natural arc of your life will be that as you fade, something else grows in its intensity and brightness. And that's what children are.
Yeah.
So I think we are experiencing that in a pretty serious way right now, where you're saying like, wow, I don't have enough time for myself anymore. All these things I used to do that were like therapeutic, good for my health, sort of rejuvenating. I don't really seem to have that time anymore.
Yeah.
And that's just the way it is, and I think when you become a parent, hopefully you have done the proper work that you're ready for that,
right?
That you can sustain giving your life force away to something else, to someone else. Because if you're not ready, you might just end up, dare I say, being a really bad parent, or you might just end up losing your mind, or your health might just suffer in an extreme way until you kind of break down.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's a whole nother conversation of like, how do you prepare to be a parent? And I guess the simplest way to say it is like, you just do as much self-work as you can. So you are ready. Your glass is full. Your fuel tank is full. So you are like ready to get on the road of being a parent and not run out of gas. At the same time, as sort of like a tangent to that, I do think that being a parent and having a kid is extremely therapeutic in its own way.
Yeah.
Like maybe you don't have time to exercise as much, maybe you don't have as much time to meditate or journal, whatever, but like now it's being replaced with this time where like you have this little living thing that's essentially part of you,
Yeah.
and you're just helping it grow and loving it and loving it. And I think that like you are engaging with a lot of like deep archetypal patterns that are very primal and ancient that like you're meant to engage with. You're also like re-engaging with your own inner child that I was sort of alluding to earlier, which I think is really therapeutic.
Yeah.
Like you are in some ways trying to heal the parts of you maybe that were wounded as you were a child through your own child.
Yeah. Maybe that's a good time to read this quote from Jung that
Alley-oop.
it was alley-oop. Oh, it's okay. Yeah, he was setting me up. Okay, so this quote is from Collected Works 17. I believe that's Development of Personality. He says, "The more impressive the parents are and the less they accept their own problems, mostly on the excuse of sparing the children, the longer the children will have to suffer from the unlived life of their parents, and the more that they will be forced into fulfilling all the things that the parents have repressed and kept unconscious." And I mean,
keep going. Keep read the whole thing.
Read the whole thing.
I think it's interesting. Yeah.
It is not a question of the parents having to be perfect in order to have no deleterious effects on their children. If they really were perfect, it would be a positive catastrophe, for the children would then have no alternative but moral inferiority, unless, of course, they choose to fight the parents with their own weapons, that is, copy them. But the trick only postpones the final reckoning till the third generation.
The rest of that was pretty complex.
Yeah.
So well, there's a lot in there actually.
As Jung often is. Like 3 sentences and then you feel like you've got to sit there and break it down for a few hours.
Yeah.
I think this quote hits at something really powerful. First and foremost is that the lack of self-work, the lack of making the unconscious conscious, the lack of knowing yourself sort of fates your children into having to live your unlived life, of having to play out all that has been unconscious for you. And I think this is where the idea of a lot of karmic family patterns and that concept seems to arise, is that which was unintegrated, unrecognized, not healed, not understood, gets passed on. And we think that maybe if we're slightly aware of, these issues that we have, we think, oh, as Jung says, we're sparing the children, or that we have to act like a perfect role model. But actually, I think it's being imperfect and constantly being engaged in the work that allows you to model for your child a good mode of living and knowing yourself. And it's very heavy because, I think no one gets away being a perfect parent, as Jung says here. So it's, I think sometimes Ara and I have looked at each other and we're like, how are we going to mess this up?
Oh yeah.
How are we going to affect her?
Most parents, I think, are having those thoughts occur to them.
Yeah.
If they're actually really involved in their kid's life, of just kind of like, and it can swing both directions, right? You could be underemphasizing trying to take care of them and make sure that they turn out well. Mm-hmm. You could just be really hands off and be like, oh, like they're fine. Like just lock Jimmy up in his room and I'll come back in 6 hours and he'll be fine. Or you could be so involved, so pushy, so obsessed with your parent being like a mega child. I think that's like a really common thing, especially like in like tech. There's such like a hacker mindset of just like life hacks, like how to maximize everything.
Or maybe even just protecting the child, kind of shielding them from all that is overwhelming.
Right, that's a different...
the too good parent.
I would just say like a different vertical for it. Yeah. It's like one is like life hacking your child to like make sure that like they do all the extracurriculars and they're trilingual.
Right.
And like they do rowing and they do cross country and they do basketball and they're going to be a doctor, but they're also going to be a surfer and they're going to travel like people actually think that way.
Yeah.
And they even, if you're rich enough, you can actually, hire like several private tutors for all those things. And like parents do that. And I think that can be really, really overblown. It can actually have the opposite effect, the opposite desired effect, which is like your kid just sort of starts to interpret life as this kind of like this really, really high pressure work that they have to do from the earliest age and they can remember. So you can go overboard with that. You can also, as you said, you can go overboard with being a helicopter parent, which is like trying to protect them from the world. And the temptation there is extremely strong.
Yeah.
That temptation, I feel like I can fathom that being more of an issue for us, for me, than like trying to life hack them and like make them mega kids. Like I can see myself wanting to protect our daughter from a lot of things because depending on your perspective, it's like the world is like pretty weird. Maybe it's always been really weird, but it's pretty weird now. And the amount of stuff out there that they could get exposed to, like a lot of it just seems like really kind of like mind poison. Like, I don't think I want you to be on the internet at all for a while. I don't think I want you to have a phone.
Yeah.
I don't think I actually want you to even watch these movies. I don't think I want you to listen to like this shitty music that's on the radio. Like you can get all these thoughts. And before you know it, you're just like, well, I guess like I'm just going to keep you like locked away.
Yeah.
So like you don't get exposed to anything and like I'll keep you safe.
Yeah.
And like that's a bad path to follow.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you're talking about all these external things, right? The movies, the TV, the phone, whatever. And the scarier thing to me and what Jung's quote emphasizes is all of which can come from this unconscious internal space. And it can, in some ways, have a similar effect of like deteriorating the child's sense of self and well-being and, their sense of security. And that task of the inner work task has been important to me for a very long time. So that hasn't changed, but it's taken on a new layer where I think that there's both a deep sense of how important it is for me to deal with my stuff. And then also, I how do I say this? It feels like a gift to my daughter when I do that because of this unseen chain that connects us. And if I could just give an example.
Yeah, I was going to say, let's kind of lay it out more concretely. What you're talking about.
So I can't remember how old she was. Maybe 3 months. She was young. And she was just in this really strange period. Like whenever babies start acting different, you look it up on the internet, it's like they're probably going through a development change and that makes them kind of crazy.
Yeah, babies have waves, which are kind of interesting. Almost like they have
I didn't know
regressions. And I'm not sure if this is true for every baby, but definitely for ours, it's like baby would have a regression. Sometimes it's like a sleep regression. Sometimes it's like other things like behavioral. Just like
behavioral.
She just seems really fussy or like just annoyed or like she's being difficult. And then once that phase ends, it's like suddenly she's sort of leapt ahead developmentally.
Yeah. She's like, whoa, she changed.
Now
even
she's
from
like
yesterday,
able to do something that she couldn't do before.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
Like 5 days of her being like a little monster, and then the 5 days are over, and she wakes up and just like, now she can say a word. And it's like, what? Like, was she just sort of computing a lot of stuff? And like, basically she's just going like, rah, 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 and then suddenly she's like, and dada. And it's like, whoa. Like, that's what you were working on.
Yeah. It's really interesting. So anyways, she's maybe 3 months. It's been several days of mostly really bad naps. And to the point that fighting the nap is getting her to being really overtired, really upset, screaming. Everything that works is not working. And after 5 days of this, on top of all the other stress of newborn life, I don't know. I just kind of had a breakdown. She was upset. I couldn't get her to sleep. At that time, Arn and I were on shifts, so I was by myself and he was sleeping because he would be up all night with her. And I don't know, I just started crying. I don't know, I put my hands and my head in my hands and I'm crying, and it's such a deep, deep cry.
Yeah.
And
I
what,
remember I woke up and walked out of the
yeah,
bedroom
yeah, I think I
to
like
see what
woke
you
you
guys were
up.
doing. Maybe you woke me up and you were just bawling.
Yeah, I was bawling.
You were just sitting with her and you guys were on the ground and
Yeah.
she seemed fine.
Yeah, she
She's
actually
almost just
wasn't
kind of
even crying
like,
at that time. She was
just
just
sort of
like, yeah,
entertaining herself. Just,
yeah,
and like you were bawling. And I was
yeah,
like, what's wrong? What's wrong? What happened?
yeah. And you know, this is what I was feeling inside. I felt like I couldn't help her. I felt like I couldn't meet her needs.
Yeah, I remember you said, I can't get her to go to sleep.
Yeah, but
Something like
but it
that.
wasn't that. It wasn't that she can't sleep. It was that it was like the role of the parent and knowing that she relies on me for for support to, and especially when they're young, like you mediate a lot of that experience. You actually have to often rock them to sleep because they're figuring it out still. And there was this deep sense of it's not even like I'm failing her, but it's like she needs me and I'm not there for her. And that feeling, she needs me and I am not there for her, activated something very young in me. And that's where this feeling of the blurring of the line between my inner child and her and all that I project onto her because she is this powerful child, right? Her child energy is powerful and it draws it out of me. And even though she's fine, I felt the pain of my inner child and I was projecting it onto her. And that feeling of she needs me and I can't help her is mine. That's my thing. And if I was to constantly bring that out and place that on her unconsciously, I don't know. I don't know where that would go, but I imagine it would get very messy. I imagine it would drive me to do certain things that would be very confusing or, you know, might eventually clash with her actual needs. And it was in that moment that I was like, I need to go back to therapy. I haven't done it, you know, since I was pregnant. And it's deeply important for me to return to this inner work because that unlived dynamic within me, it will fall onto her if I'm not careful.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is like a ways off, but trying to be mindful of these dynamics, it's um, the kinds of things that were difficult for me when I was a child. Maybe when I was like in elementary school through middle school was sort of, there was a deep feeling of frustration and also just sort of like wrongness, like unfairness that had to do with me being in school.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of it came from this feeling that I was being punished for being more advanced, for being more creative,
Yeah.
or
Kind of being a bit out of the box.
being out of the
Then.
box, being kind of like a different kind of learner.
Yeah, yeah.
So I've probably alluded to this in the podcast before, and it's kind of personal, and I want to be careful with this stuff. But like, I really, really did not like school, and I felt like school felt like prison.
Mm.
I think that's probably true for a lot of boys. I think definitely have a lot of trouble sitting still or paying attention. They want to just like be out in the woods, like, hitting each other with sticks, and they have to sit still in a classroom. Like that's one aspect. I think for me, it's like the kind of way that I liked to learn was kind of more self-guided, sort of more independent, kind of more creative. Like I think I was pretty gifted as a child, and yet I felt really like a troublemaker. There was like one instance in particular where there were a lot of them, but like there was one where when I got to sixth grade, I think it was like algebra all of a sudden, or we had this math test that we had taken. It was like the first test in this class, and the teacher wanted us to approach math a different way, which was to show all of our work a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
You had to like write out like 6 times 5, and here's the line underneath it or whatever. Like all this stuff had to be shown, and for some reason I just like didn't get that, and so I did the math test and I got all the right answers.
Yeah.
I wrote out all the right answers because I just did all of it in my head, and the teacher gave me a C. And I'd never gotten a C before.
Yeah.
I'd never been like, I'd never like experienced getting a bad grade, and I just did not understand. I was like, super upset. I felt like super guilty. I felt super like disoriented. Just like, what? Like, why? It's like, you didn't show your work. And it's like, but I got all the right answers. And it's like, yeah, but you didn't show your work. And I just had this feeling of like, but I know how to do it. And she was saying, but you didn't do it the way that I'm teaching you. Therefore, you get a bad grade. And like that kind of like was sort of the the vibe with school often for me was sort of this feeling of like, I know what I'm doing. I'm smart enough. I'm creative enough to do this, but constantly butting heads with teachers, constantly being told that I'm sort of like causing trouble or I'm making other kids sort of feel confused about how to do things because Arden's doing it differently, et cetera. So that kind of feeling, this is sort of a long story, but I feel aware that when the time comes for her to sort of start engaging in things like school or going to be part of certain systems or groups that are doing stuff, I feel like if I'm not careful, I might be hyper vigilant in trying to protect her from feeling bad or weird for being
like you're anticipating
different.
that she's going to have your experience.
I'm anticipating that she's probably going to be kind of like you and me, which means that she's going to be very sensitive, but also very smart and very creative. And she might approach things in a way that just is kind of weird and dreamy and different. And she might seem like a kind of like a very artistic kind of child. And that might just get beaten out of her through a series of bad experiences.
Yeah.
And that's like, that is so painful because like the idea that she could be, and who knows, she could turn out to be someone totally different. But if she turned out to be some sort of artistic, smart person, it's like, what a beautiful thing. Like, what an amazing, beautiful thing that you want to cultivate, that you want to encourage in children to like be these dreamers who like know how to create things. And it's like the idea that the opposite could happen, that she could start to feel really bad about herself for that and like have it beaten out of her to the point where she just becomes like a person who's really ashamed of herself.
Yeah.
It's like, I feel hyper vigilant, but that would be passing on a certain pattern that might just result in her repeating some of the bad experiences I had in some way, or there being compensatory dynamics where she rebels against that or confuses her, et cetera, et cetera. So there are things like that, you know, I need to do my own self-work in order not to pass on my baggage to her.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's heavy. And the role that you now play as the guide, you know, the parent as guide is something that I'm taking very seriously, and at the same time want to hold with lightness, because I feel like if I'm too serious, if it's too heavy, it's like, I don't know, it's like you'll falter, or you know, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like you're before each of those big moments, I think, or even little moments, it's going to be, oh, well, what can go wrong here? Or I need to make the right decision. You know, it's jumping many steps ahead. And so it's this tension between being aware of those dynamics and not leaning into them too heavily, and constantly needing to kind of find the harmony between those, and recognizing when you go towards one side and you need to adjust a little bit, because no one can manage that in any perfect way. And it keeps happening in different cycles, because the story I told earlier is one version of, well, I need to do some inner work here. And it's happened multiple times. And it has been a really interesting opportunity to see what comes up in me, because she, as this dynamic, like she has a personality, and she's clearly very different than a lot of other babies we know, yet that there's something very,
all of this would be very unique.
Yeah.
That's one thing you realize when you are around a community of newborns like we are. It's like every kid is super unique.
Yeah.
From the get-go.
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Like you can see the personality when they're like a few months old.
Yeah.
It's like, whoa, you are way different than this other child who is the same age and the same sex or whatever. And so
part of what I'm trying to say is that she is uniquely herself, and it's personal to her. And yet there must be something about the child which is so deeply archetypal that it activates that in everyone who's near it. And so that there's something that transcends her too, right? Do you understand what I'm saying? You know, it's her and it's not her. And this child aspect, this archetype of the child, we might say, it's so powerful. And all kids, I think, embody this to many different degrees, that it allows me to access inner child in ways that have been really beautiful, like just lightness and joy and experience for the fun of it, or the dark parts of meeting, some sort of locked away inner child part that I have not been aware of. And this experience of parenthood, I think, has been a series of these really dynamic archetypal experiences. Because then there's something about parenthood itself that is its own archetype. And we haven't really touched on this yet, but I think the experience a lot of the last 10 months as well has been how weird time is. And not even just the Groundhog Day of like repeating the same kind of schedule and doing the same kind of things over and over again with a very, very small child. But there's something about the bending of reality that happens once the child is born. And I don't know when that changes, but it's definitely still happening. And it's something that I think began when she was born.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it ever goes back the way it was before. But I realized we talked about this in our first take.
Right. Yeah, we didn't.
With the baby on my lap, and it didn't work. So we haven't talked about this yet this episode.
Mm-hmm.
But yes, the weirdness of time. As I was alluding to earlier on this episode, is that your subjectivity changes, your phenomenology changes.
Yeah.
A lot of the information that's coming in as you navigate through your reality is being filtered through the child. And it's every day. There's no break, right? There's no weekends from the child. I think that the paradigm shift to the nature of your reality is so extreme that often when we experience a huge paradigm shift to our perception, to our projective landscape, whether that is having some sort of intense religious experience or some sort of strange encounter that kind of changes the way we think about things, or artificially doing drugs is a really easy way to do this for a temporary amount of time, or maybe beyond the time that you're actually high. But like a common experience when you are in an altered reality is time is weird, right? Everything feels simultaneously kind of like it's going by very quick and going by very slow. Not always. Sometimes it's like one or the other. Often when you're on drugs, things feel like they're going by very slowly. And usually I think that has to do a lot with novelty. Like when we are encountering novelty in life, time is affected by that, which is why if you are, for instance, traveling through Europe and every day is different and there's all this new stuff you're experiencing all the time, like a week can feel like a very long time, especially when you look backwards. You're like, wow, we've only been in Italy for like 3 days. Like, it feels like forever. And conversely, if there's no novelty in your life and you wake up and you do the same thing over and over and over and over again, like you look back and you're like, wow, the last year just went by in a flash. So novelty has a huge effect on that. So definitely having a kid is like entering a weird dream or entering a weird sort of altered state or getting high and just never coming down. Yeah. I think that's what it's like. Obviously, she's going to change. And as she changes, our reality will change with it. But at least for now, it's like ever since she was born, ever since you went to the hospital and gave birth, we've been on some weird trip. Yeah. In some weird dream. And like it hasn't gone back to the way it was before. And I don't think it ever will.
No, but I do wonder if the feeling of the experience of time and the reality shifting might kind of go back to a sense of more normalcy, maybe especially, if she starts going to school or, you know what I mean? Like it's, there might
probably
be.
Just keep changing. That's kind of how I feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like reality will just keep bending in weird directions and things will feel really weird, I think, when she's going to school. And then they'll feel really weird when she's out of the house.
Yeah.
And then once she gets married and has her own kids or whatever, it's like it's going to feel really weird again. Like, this is new, But I think it's probably quite concentrated right now with this, first year of being new parents.
Yeah. I mean, we don't know yet. And I'm actually curious to ask some of our friends or family who have children, because there does feel like a quality to this past year that is even the experience of time. And this isn't just you're tired and sleep deprived. There's this feeling of things blurring together, things really, really, really slowing down. Like the first like 20 days of her life felt very slow in a way. And then things kind of have, like, they keep undulating and moving as if it's breathing, like fast, slow, fast, slow. Um, and I just think that, to your point about it feels like a drug trip or a religious experience, these are the typical indicators of when we're around, or when an archetype is really constellated in life, and when the structures of ego, with all of its firm boundaries of how it measures reality, when all of those start to falter, is oftentimes when there are really deep meetings with unconscious material. And if it then particularly carries this really mysterious, numinous, world-bending quality, it's like you might really, really be with some kind of archetypal component. And yeah, I think what it's made me reflect on is just how much this experience of these past 10 months have been both grounding and embodying and personal and unfolding, and then it has been so archetypal in nature. And I think the feeling of reality being weird is part of that, of things being kind of timeless, of the depth of how beautiful and mysterious this relationship that I'm building with my daughter is. And when I think about life before her, even like those moments that were really special, there's something that's different about this. And of course, there are other experiences before her that I think there were the outbreak of unconscious material or an intense meeting with an archetype that carried its own like numinosity or intensity. And so I don't know, part of it is just the framing that the initiation into parenthood is this deep meeting of the archetype itself, which both contains and transcends you. And it's also this grounded, very personal thing that we're building and creating in the moment.
Yeah. One way of thinking about that, or like what that brings up for me, is that the act of having offspring it precedes humanity, right? It's way older than humans. Our ancestors, if you go back far enough, who were, like squirrels and trees, basically, just like, 50 million years ago, 100 million years ago, before, longer than that, like they were having offspring.
Yeah.
So, and if you go back further and further, it's like reproduction as a thing is almost like what defines like biology. And so the reproductive act is something that is so core to us, so ancient, it's so ingrained in everything about us, that you would think that once you have your own child, that like that very deep ancient blueprint, and you could call it the archetypal sort of structure that's like within us, gets constellated in a very, very strong way. And so you find yourself kind of like being realigned or rehomed in your own humanity, I think. Of just like, whoa, like I'm a human, like the archetype of the child, the parent, this thing stretches back to when we were like, tiny little squirrels in trees. And it's still going in us now. So that's one way to think about archetypes, is that, it's like kind of like psychological nature. And that nature has been building and complexifying and developing for hundreds of millions of years. And so to have a child is to sort of plug back into that in a very direct way.
Yeah. Well, speaking of, all that the archetype does, it also conditions images and stories, and we see the drama of parent and child, and all sorts of interesting stories and fairy tales and mythologies, and it gives us a good snapshot of what it's like in that space, in that mythic realm, to experience the archetype in all of its variants, lots of different versions, and how fraught it can be. the weight of responsibility, the distress that comes, the joy, really classic Greek myths about parent and child, of course, Demeter and Persephone being a huge one. In the beginning, Demeter, that great goddess of the grain, and her daughter, known then usually as Kore, so she's just maiden, she's nameless, a nameless daughter. They're so identified, they're so bound together. And then when Persephone is stolen into the underworld, the kind of grief that overcomes Demeter to the point of which, she withholds the abundance of the land. So nothing grows, everything withers and begins to die. It's kind of like, there's your eternal winter. And it's, you start to see the great depths of the grief that a parent can carry at a perceived loss of a child or a wounding in that child-parent relationship. And what's beautiful, of course, about that story is it's part of this greater whole of evolution and how Kore becomes Persephone, and she steps into selfhood and is both eternally a daughter and now also a queen, and mature within herself and equal ruler of the underworld. And so it shows these interesting life cycles of parent and child. Or maybe you have that overly nurturing, too good parent, like Achilles and his mother, and how she just wants to protect him and make sure nothing happens to him. So she dips him, in the river, and he is indestructible, except, of course, where she held him on the Achilles tendon on the back of the ankle. And that's his vulnerable spot. And so it's all these interesting ways in which the experience of parenthood can be felt inwardly, but we can also turn towards these stories to make sense of them, or to at least deepen our imagination and be given symbols and containers to explore our experience too.
For sure. I mean, I think the child probably is like the dominant figure in most modern media. I mean, there's a lot in there, sort of like, what do I mean? Like the puer or like the hero or something like that. But like, what is usually most compelling for people in a story is usually a young person who has a lot of potential and freedom to go explore or do something. Right. And that's like the archetype of the child being sort of constellated for us. Like we find it compelling. So most stories, if you were to, it's why you see a lot of stories about children, like the parents are just missing for some reason.
Yeah.
Or it's like, where are the parents?
Yeah.
It's like these kids are just going off on these crazy adventures, or like, there's like all these monsters that are in the town chasing them, and it's like, where are the parents? And it's like, it's like, what's
like
compelling?
Stranger Things.
Like Stranger Things, or I mean, I think you can name a lot of media where that's the case, where it's like the parents are just sort of absent from the story because it's more fun if it's like these kids and like they have so much potential and they're learning about life and they're changing and like, oh, they have to go on this crazy adventure. It's like that is happening to parents before their eyes. It's like they are witnessing and participating in that story of this thing that has so much potential to go out in the world and do things. And she's free, sort of, and she's clay that could still be molded in all these directions. And that's really, really appealing and beautiful. If you were to take a lot of movies featuring children, you have Disney movies, whatever, and replace them with like old people. Like, oh, here's like grandma, like she's 90 and she's going on an adventure. It's like usually, I mean, you have stories like that can be kind of funny, comedic, or even like, they could be like arty in a really beautiful way, but usually that's not as compelling to people. Like people are less interested in watching or hearing about a story about someone who's really, really old than they are watching and hearing about a story of someone who is young.
Well, probably because the viewpoint that you're talking about does feel quite like the rising dawn of life, which we want to see played out through the child or through the heroic impulse, and those of the older person, whether they're grandparents or just like wise old figures, we want to see them in a different role, probably not necessarily in that, heroic, outgoing, explorative nature, but rather something more aligned to maybe like the deep inner experience that is aligned with that aspect of life. So I don't know, the stories that surround children and their developments, sometimes it is like the parents are there, as you said, or not there, or we see the tension between the children being on the threshold of maturity, and how you have to separate from the parent and how important that is. One other, Greek myth aspect that I'll bring up, when I was thinking about this, I was like, what about Chiron? Chiron, the incredibly wise healer, centaur who takes in all of the orphaned heroes. None of these young heroes are his children, and yet he is a parent to them. And I think it's an interesting model.
Is he in the Disney version of Hercules?
I have no idea.
Is that Chiron?
Is he a centaur? Probably.
I think so. He's like a little goat man.
No.
Like he's like the coach. He's like Hercules' coach.
Well, is he a goat or is he
I don't remember, but like it's like he's like training Hercules, and Hercules is kind of like an orphan. I cannot remember
the last time I saw.
I mean, they definitely like, how would you say, like mashed up and remixed like the mythology for that movie.
Sure
and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Point is, Chiron, at least in traditional Greek mythology, is a centaur, so he's half human, half horse, and he is very different than other centaurs who are usually like quite wild and violent. He is a healer. He knows the art of, archery and training and all these different things, and he is educated in all these different subjects, and he takes in pretty much every hero that you can think about, And what is it like to have the parent archetype activated when you haven't actually stepped into parenthood because you've given birth to a child or you helped conceive a child? I think it brings to mind just how that is accessible to all of us through these different acts. And it doesn't have to be that you actually adopt a child and that's how you touch into it. I think it shows that there might be a creative, heroic impulse in your life that needs gestating and needs tending. And it could be something, like you said, like the cultural impact or a vocational impact that you usher into life. But that sometimes also there's an abandonment that happens that's very core to the experience of the child, the orphaned child, and what is it that they're needing and might ultimately find in another, because many people can play the role of parent.
Yeah. A statement. What is the statement? What would you say? Anyways, something that I enjoy is kind of like a way of describing life is that like no one makes it to adulthood without agape. Which is to say that like there is no child that can survive and make it into adulthood without someone giving away their life force to them in some way, even if that's someone who's working at an orphanage or,
just like a teacher,
a grandparent who decides to adopt the child because the parents are out of the picture for whatever reason. It's just like no one makes it, no one survives without the love of someone else to give it to them.
Yeah.
And that's important to remember that there's a lot of ways that people can play that role of sort of gifting away their life force, their love, giving their heart to a baby, basically to bring it into adulthood. Usually it's the parents, but it's not always. Yeah. And often everyone in the tribe is doing it at the same time. Mm-hmm. I think something else that is interesting in a lot of like fairy tales in myths is sort of like the absent parent that is so prominent, and the presence of kind of like the stepmother or the stepfather in these myths. Yeah. Often the bad stepmother or stepfather.
Right, yeah.
And the orphaned child is basically like forced to sort of live with them for whatever reason, and they're sort of abusive. So obvious example is like Harry Potter, living with his stepmother and stepfather, and he's living under the stairs, and they basically treat him very poorly. And where are his parents? His parents were murdered.
His aunt and uncle.
aunt and uncle, right? His mom's sister.
His
Is who
mom's
he's staying with.
sister. Yeah.
But that's like a big part of the compelling arc of Harry Potter. The story of him is that
Right.
his parents are dead,
Yeah.
and he still has a relationship with them, and he's still almost actually interacting with their spirits like throughout the books. But that like is sort of a kind of energy that is being played with in that story.
Yeah.
There's also like other fairy tales, like Cinderella.
Yeah.
Vasilisa.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've always sort of viewed it psychologically. Like sometimes it's like the death of the mother, and then there's this evil stepmother who takes her place, and that there's something about the absence of a good enough parent that constellates the shadow parent essentially. And so in the case like of Vasilisa, is her very, loving mother passes away due to sickness. The father remarries, and the mother with, of course, two daughters. So it's like the trifecta of, shadow feminine. It also becomes an opportunity for Vasilisa to meet that shadow very profoundly, and then to go further to meet an actual great mother figure who encompasses all of those dynamics. But when I try to think about that more concretely, it's, if there's some sort of absence with a parent, does it bring forth a darkness? And might that darkness be a kind of destructive parent, even if it's internally, because we always talk about with the archetype that it's both this transcendent thing and it sort of contains and conditions your actual mother, but it also, there's the inner experience of mother. And so you might have a parent who is seemingly absent, or, not meeting certain demands that they need to for the necessary development or needs of a child. And what it can activate within the psyche is that evil step parent who is punitive, excessively violent, wants to suppress or even destroy your life force. And I think that's an experience a lot of us have, and we don't even realize it. But the stories, they kind of give us at least a way to explore that and to see the ways in which we might be able to relate and understand it.
Some modern myths that I enjoy that sort of interact with parenthood. If you follow my work, Children of Men is a big movie for me. And as we were sort of describing the way that a community or tribe is kind of cyclical in its energy, there's always the outgoing that's paired with the incoming. And there's sort of this circle of life, basically, of like the newborns come and the old people die, and it's rejuvenation constant. And Children of Men is an exploration of like what would happen to the world if the incoming was removed. And the plot is that people abruptly, mysteriously stop having children. Everyone's infertile. And then, what happens in 20 years of infertility in the entire world. And basically, like, the world collapses. It's just like apocalypse.
Yeah.
And so I think that that's true and accurate. And it's kind of like a metaphor for like what happens to a community or family or tribe if no one has any children, is like it kind of just sort of like will collapse eventually. People will drift apart. Maybe it won't be catastrophic like the end of the world, but like a tribe cannot continue to thrive and feel whole and healthy and resilient if there's no youthful new energy coming in.
Well, eventually if no one had children, the family line would end.
Well, yeah, I mean, everyone would just die eventually. I mean, there's that quite literally.
Yeah.
Another book/movie. The movie's okay, honestly. It's fine, but the book's a lot better, I think, is The Road by Cormac McCarthy. And I think it's a really interesting book. It's about fatherhood, and essentially the world has ended again in all these stories, right? It's kind of interesting. It's something kind of apocalyptic about parenthood and the absence of children. But the world's ended, and a father is traveling essentially down a highway with his son in this apocalyptic landscape where civilization has collapsed and has been collapsed for a long time. And he's trying to get the kid somewhere down south, I think, to be safe. And so it's about his story of fatherhood, and essentially where he's like giving away his life force entirely to his kid to try and protect him and get him someplace safe.
Oh, that makes me think of what's that zombie show that was a video game that's really popular right now?
The Last of Us.
Yeah, right. It's
Yes,
here we have
similar vibe,
a
right?
Chiron figure, right?
Good example.
Yeah,
Very,
right?
very topical because I think a lot of people probably watched this show recently.
Yeah.
The game is way better. Play the game if you can. Both parts, both games are really, really amazing. But the show is also decent.
Joel. Spoiler alert, I guess.
Well, the plot is that there's a child that needs to get somewhere in this apocalyptic zombie world, and there is a older man who finds himself having to protect this child and get her someplace across the country.
And you see how he begins to build this father-daughter relationship to her, despite, them not having a blood relation. And I think he's quite cold at first and distant.
Yeah, he's dealing with his own trauma of his own child dying.
Yeah.
And that's like a big part of it. He's resistant to playing father, and yet he really wants to be a father at the same time. And so if we're talking about like self-work and passing on one's own baggage.
Oh yeah,
I think that show, that story kind of explores that in a big way.
Yeah.
Joel hasn't done enough self-work, to say the least. I mean, it's hard. It's
hard
when the world's ended and there's zombies and you're fighting for your life. But he brings a lot of baggage into his relationship with this girl.
Yeah, and I think also, what's her name, Ellie?
Yeah.
Kind of, I guess, spoiler alert, whatever.
Spoiler alert. Whenever you get to this part of the podcast, we are going to spoil all this media. So if you don't want to be spoiled, turn off the podcast. Whenever we do this, we always do this at the end of the episode. Or at least recently, we've been doing this at the end of the episode.
Yeah.
Spoiler alert.
Okay, so anyways, she's immune to zombies. They bite her, she doesn't become a zombie. And isn't it interesting about the symbol of the child, sort of similar to like Children of Men in a way. It's like hope restored. That symbol contained, within her, and not, an older person or anything like that. So anyways, that's a really good example, I think, of both the archetype of the child and the archetype of parenthood.
Yes, definitely. In the context of the tribe being healthy, the world being healthy, it's like the child is very instinctually, very primally hope for the future.
Yeah.
So in a world where children are gone, a child emerges and everyone's like, holy shit. And everyone needs to protect it. In Children of Men, people are even fighting over it.
Yeah.
But in The Last of Us, it definitely represents something like this child brings with her some light to cast out the darkness and rebuild the world.
Yeah.
And, that's very literal in these stories, like literally like rebuilding the world. But, even in your own life, I think a child represents hope to your tribe, to your family, the incoming generation. New children represent this light of rejuvenation to rebuild the world, save the world, essentially save the community, heal the community, bring in new life, and, reignite this fire that essentially is at the core of our existence.
Yeah. And parenthood is the task to protect it and carry it forward, and then know when it's time to release and let go and let it find its path.
Yeah, while you fade away.
Yeah.
And we have a ways to go before it's time for us to fade away and retire. So a lot of work. One of the crazy things about having a kid is it goes by very quick. This year has gone by extremely quickly. It also feels kind of like it's taking forever in some ways. But, she is going to be in our lives for forever now.
Yeah.
And we have a long, long road ahead of discovering what that means.
If you're interested in reading my writing or attending workshops on inner work, archetypal studies, and Jungian psychology, check out theartemisian.com.
If you want to follow my writing, go to arnrogerson.substack.com.
Thanks for listening.
See you next time.